B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn Tainis Daf Lamed. We're going to start 8 lines from the top of the Amud. Says the Gemara, Erev Tisha B'Av lo yochal Adam beis tafshilin v'chulu. We learned in the Mishnah, the end of the Mishnah on Daf Chavav Amud Beis, we learned that on Erev Tisha B'Av one's not allowed to eat 2 cooked dishes, one's also not allowed to eat meat, and not allowed to drink wine. Omer Rav Yehuda, lo yishanu elo mishei shoyis ulemato. Ulamalo. Rav Yehuda says that's only after Chatzos, after midday. Avol mishei shoyis ulemato mutter. But before midday, one was allowed to eat 2 dishes, 2 cooked dishes, or meat or wine. Omer Rav Yehuda, another statement from Rav Yehuda, lo yishanu elo besuda hamafsik ba. That this restriction only applies on the meal which is going to be the final meal before the onset of the fast, which means he's not intending to eat another meal after this meal. It's what we call the Sudas HaMafsekes. Aval besuda she'eina mafsik ba. But if it's not the final meal, mutter, then these restrictions do not apply. And the Gemara says, v'tarvaihu l'kula, and both of these statements from Rav Yehuda have a leniency. And we need them both, because logic would say that the last meal before the fast is after midday. But that doesn't have to be that way, and to make sure that we take the lenient side of both, he made both statements. If he would just have said that these restrictions only apply to the last meal before the fast, I may have thought, even if it's in the morning before midday, this would be true. Komash malon, that's what Rav Yehuda came to tell us, that mishei shois ulemailo, that even if it's the final meal, besides for being the final meal, it also has to be after Chatzos. And if he would have just told us that these restrictions only apply to a meal after midday, I may have thought, even if it's not the last Suda, if he's going to eat 2 meals in the afternoon on Erev Tisha B'Av, I may have thought that these restrictions apply to both. Komash malon, that's why he said his other statement, that Besuda HaMafsik Ba, that besides for it being afternoon time, it also has to be his final meal before the onset of the fast. Now says the Gemara, Tanya Kalishna Kama, Tanya Kalishna Basra. We're going to now see a brisa which says both of each brisa says like one of the versions, one of the statements of Rav Yehuda. Tanya Kalishna Basra. The brisa that says like the second statement of Rav Yehuda, that Rav Yehuda said that it's only if it's the final meal before the fast where these restrictions apply. The brisa says Hasoyed Erev Tisha B'Av, that if somebody's eating a meal on Erev Tisha B'Av, im osid lisoid suda acheres, if he's intending to eat another meal after this one, mutelech il basar, then in this first one he's allowed to eat meat, v'lishtes yain, and drink wine. Ve'im lav, but if he's not intending to have any other meals, which means this is the last meal before the onset of the fast, oselech il basar v'lishtes yain, he's not allowed to eat meat or drink wine. Tanya Kalishna Kama, a brisa to the effect of the first statement of Rav Yehuda, who says that it's dependent on whether it's afternoon or not. It says the brisa, Erev Tisha B'Av lo yochal Adam shnei tafshilin, a person should not eat 2 cooked dishes on Erev Tisha B'Av. Lo yochal basar, he shouldn't eat meat, v'lo yishte yain, he should not drink wine. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, Yeshane, he should do something different. With his usual pattern of eating, he should do it differently. There should be some sign of mourning, of acknowledgement that Tisha B'Av is about to start. Omer Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said in the Brisa, Keitzad Meshane, how does one change? What does it mean he should do it differently? Im hoya rogi lechel shnei tavshilin. If he was used to eating 2 cooked dishes, yechal min echad, he should eat just 1 cooked dish. Ve'im hoya rogi lisoid ba'asara b'nei adam. If he was used to eating with an company of 10 people who were there because he was a prestigious person, a prominent person, and many people would eat with him in honor of him, sayid b'chamisha. Then on Erev Tisha B'Av he should eat with just 5 people. Half of what he's used to. If he's used to drinking 10 cups of wine, he should drink just 5. when are these restrictions true? And this is the part of the Brisa which the Gemara intended, is Mishei Shoyse Lemaila, only after midday. Aval Mishei Shoyse Lemata, but before midday, Mutter, these restrictions do not apply. Continues the Gemara, another Brisa on this topic, Tanya Idach. Erev Tisha B'Av, Lo yoichal odom shnei tavshilin, a person should not eat 2 cooked dishes. Lo yoichal boso, he shouldn't eat meat. V'lo yishteh yain, he shouldn't drink wine. Divrei Reb Meir. The Chachomim say Yeshane, that regarding the 2 cooked dishes, he should do it differently. He should minimize, or he should do it in a different fashion than he's used to. And besides that, u'memayit v'bosor u'beyayin, and he should eat less meat and drink less wine than he's used to. Keitzad memayit, what does it mean to minimize the amount of meat that you're drinking, that you're eating? Im hoya rogi lechel litra bosor, if you're used to eating a litra, which is a measure of meat, yechal chetzi litra, then on Erev Tisha B'Av he should only eat half a litra. Hoya rogi lishtois loig yain, if you're used to drinking a whole loig, a measure of wine, yishteh chetzi loig yain, then on Erev Tisha B'Av you should only drink half a loig of wine. V'meinei rogil kol ikar, and if he's not used to eating meat or drinking wine at all, also then he shouldn't eat any meat or drink any wine at all. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, a person who's used to eating radishes, the types of radish, or types of salty dishes like salty fish or salty meat, after his meal, then he's allowed to do that even on Erev Tisha B'Av. Tanya Idach, in another brayse, it says, Kol shehu mishum Tisha B'Av. Any meal that you're having because of Tisha B'Av, which means that it's the last meal, the Sudas HaMafsekes, Osur lechil bosor, he's not allowed to eat meat, v'osur lishtes yain, he's not allowed to drink wine, v'osur lirchotz, and you have to know what that means, but v'osur lirchotz, he's not allowed to wash either. We're soon going to discuss that. He's not allowed to wash himself. Kol she'einei mishum Tisha B'Av, if it's either the last meal before another public fast other than Tisha B'Av, or if it's not the last meal on Erev Tisha B'Av, muter lechil bosor, one's allowed to eat meat, v'lishtes yain, and drink wine, v'osur lirchotz, and he's not allowed to wash himself. Rabbi Shmuel b'Rabbi Yosi Omer, mishum aviv, Rabbi Shmuel said in the name of his father Rabbi Yosi, kol shor shemuter lechil, any time that one is allowed to eat, it says lechil bosor, but it means any time that the fast hasn't started yet, muter lirchotz, he's allowed to wash. Continues the Gemara Tanu Rabbanon, kol mitzvos hanoegos ba'ovel. Any of the halachas that apply to any person in mourning, noegos b'Tisha B'Av, they also apply on Tisha B'Av to everybody. Which means that besides for asar b'achila or b'shtia, besides the fact that on Tisha B'Av one's not allowed to eat or drink, and this obviously does not apply to an oval, however the following halachas that apply to every oval, to every person in mourning, also apply on Tisha B'Av, which is the washing, ubesicha, and anointing oneself with oils, ubeni'ilas sandal, and wearing shoes, ubetashmish hamita, and marital relations. V'asa likros b'Torah, one's not allowed to learn in Torah in a place where one is accustomed to and where it's a pleasure to be learning. B'neviim u'b'ksuvim, Torah, neviim, and ksuvim, the different parts of the written Torah. V'leshanois, nor is it mutter to learn b'mishnah u'b'talmud, which is the Mishnayos and the inner understandings of the Mishnayos, which is called Talmud, what we have today as the Gemara, u'b'medrash, u'b'halachis, u'b'agodis, different areas of Torah, there one's not allowed to learn them on Tisha B'Av. Aval koirahu, but he's allowed to read v'mokim she'einei rogil likros, but in a place where he's not accustomed and used to reading, and he doesn't understand it so well, and that causes him discomfort that he's learning there, therefore it's allowed on Tisha B'Av. V'shoinei is allowed to learn b'mokim she'einei rogil lishnois, he's allowed to learn Mishnayos and other things, as we learned, in places where he's not accustomed to it, and therefore he doesn't have the same level of pleasure when he's learning. V'koira b'kinois, b'Iyov, he's allowed to read the parts of Iyov that are mourning and lamenting, u'b'dvarim haroim sheb Yirmiyah, and the sad parts of Sefer Yirmiyah. V'tinoikas shel beis Rabban b'teilim, or some have the version here, Einon B'Teilim, and they skip the Pasuk here, but the children in school, according to our version of the Gemara, the children in school are B'Teilim, they do not learn Torah in school, Mishum Shenemar, because it says, Pikudei Hashem Yeshorim, Hashem's commandments are upright, Mesamchei Leiv, they cause a person to be very happy, and since on Tisha B'Av one's not allowed to be happy, therefore they would not learn Torah in the schools, to the young children. And others have the Girsa, the Vilna Gaon's Girsa here, is that the school children, they are not B'Teilim, they are allowed to go to school, and this Pasuk is not mentioned here. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, that was the opinion of Reb Meir. Reb Yehuda argues and says, Af even a person who is not accustomed to a particular portion of the Torah is not allowed to read there. And also the Mishnayos, he's not allowed, and other parts of the oral Torah, he's not allowed to learn, even the parts where he's not accustomed there. But as the Tanna Kamma said, he's allowed to read in Iyov, Ubekinois, Ubedvarim Haroim, Shebiyirmiyah, and the Kinois in Yirmiyah, and the Dvarim Haroim, the bad things mentioned in Yirmiyah. V'tinoikas shall base Rabban B'Teilim, and the children in school do not go to school. B'Teilim boy mishum shenemar, because it says Pikudei Hashem Yesharim Mesamchei Leiv, that Torah always gladdens the heart, and therefore it's something that one's not allowed to do on Tisha B'Av. Continues the Gemara is taking us back to the Mishnah. Lo yoichal basav v'lo yishta yayin, in the meal that we've already discussed, the Sudas HaMafsekes, in the afternoon before the onset of Tisha B'Av, one should not eat meat nor drink wine. And when we mentioned before that Meliach, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said that one's allowed to eat salty meat and fish at the end of the meal, there, because it's so salty, it hardly has the status of meat. That's how Rashi explains this. Says the Gemara, Tana, we learnt, Aval oichelhu basar meliach, but salty meat he's allowed to eat, v'shoisa yain megitoi, and he's allowed to drink the wine from his wine press. Says the Gemara, basar meliach ad kama. What's the definition? What defines that meat is called salty meat that one's allowed to eat? Because it's so salty that it hardly has the definition of meat. Omar of Chinina bar Kahana Mishmei de Shmuel Kolzman She'enoi or Kolzman Shehu Keshlomim, and what this means is that as long as it hasn't been salted for 3 days, then he's not allowed to eat it. Shlomim is eaten for 2 days and a night, and it says that if it's like a shlomim, which means it's not 3 days, if it's not been in salt for 3 days, then one's not allowed to eat it. If it's been in salt for 3 days, then it's so salty that one's allowed to eat it. V'yayin migitoi, this new sweet wine still in the wine press, ad kama, how long, or what tells us whether it's still considered yayin migitoi, that one's allowed to drink it on Erev Tisha B'Av. Says the Gemara, calls manshu toisus, all the while it's still fermenting, and whilst it's fermenting, then it's not as good as old wine, and it can cause digestive issues, and it can be harmful, and therefore there's no problem with drinking it during the Sudas HaMafsekes. Tana, yayin toisis ein boi mishum gilui. We just mentioned wine that was still fermenting. Well, the fermenting wine is allowed to be drunk even if it's been exposed, if it's been open, because normally the issue of exposed wine, one's not allowed to drink it, is we're afraid that a snake drank from it and some of its poison went into the wine. However, a snake wouldn't go, because of the fermenting, the snake wouldn't go near it. How many days, how long is the fermenting stage? Says the Gemara, Gimel Yomim is 3 days. Continues the Gemara. Omer of Yehuda Omarav, Kachoya min Hogesh Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eloi. Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi was accustomed on Erev Tisha B'Av, for the Sudas HaMafsekes, Mevi'en Loi Pas Chareva b'melach, they would bring him dry bread with salt. V'yoshev bein tanur l'kiraim, he would sit in the most filthy place in the house, as if in mourning, between the oven and the stove, where it was very dirty of all the soot and the ashes and the smoke. V'oichel v'shoise oleo kitoin shel mayim, and he would eat and he would drink with it a jug of water. V'doime k'misha meisei muter lefonov, it would be as if is a deceased person lying in front of him, in mourning of the Beis Hamikdash. Continues the Gemara, Tanan Hasam, we learnt in a Mishnah, Mokim shenoa gulasis malacha b'Tisha B'Av, oisin. Those places that they were accustomed to doing work on Tisha B'Av, one's allowed to do work there. Mokim shenoagu sheloi la'asos, but those places where the custom was not to work on Tisha B'Av, in oisin, one's not allowed to work on Tisha B'Av. One has to respect the local custom. Ubechol mokim Talmidei Chachomim b'Teilim, but even in a place where the laymen are working on Tisha B'Av, the Talmidei Chachomim should refrain from working on Tisha B'Av. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer La'olam Yaseh Kol Odom Atzmet K'Talmid Chacham. In this context, and only in this context, in contrast to what Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said earlier on Daf Yud Amud Beis, but in this context, even somebody who's not really a Talmid Chacham can act as a Talmid Chacham and express mourning for the Beis HaMikdash and not get distracted by other work. Tanya Nami Hachi, we saw a brisa to this effect. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer La'olam Yaseh Adam Atzmei K'Talmid Chacham. A person should always make himself or act as if he was a Talmid Chacham, Kadei She'yis'aneh, in order to afflict himself and mourn for the Beis HaMikdash. Tanya Idach, we learned in another brisa, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Kol ha'oichel v'shoyse b'Tisha B'Av, anybody who eats or drinks on Tisha B'Av, Ki'ilu oichel v'shoyse b'Yom Kippurim. On some level, it's compared to somebody who eats and drinks on Yom Kippur. Rebbe Akiva Omer, Kol ha'oiser melacha b'Tisha B'Av, anybody who engages in other work on Tisha B'Av, Eino roya siman bracha la'olam. He's not going to see any blessing in the money that he earns on Tisha B'Av. V'chachomim oimrim, Kol ha'oiser melacha b'Tisha B'Av, anybody who works on Tisha B'Av, ve'eino mis'abel an Yerushalayim, and refrains from mourning over Yerushalayim, eino roya b'simchasa, is not going to merit seeing the joy of Yerushalayim. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, Simchu es Yerushalayim, v'gilu bo kol ohaveo, sisu ita mosois kol hamisablim oleo. Who are the people who are going to be joyous with Yerushalayim? And as the pasuk expresses, as only those kol hamisablim oleo, only those who actually mourned over her. Mikan omru, from here we said, the Chachomim said that kol hamisabel al Yerushalayim, anybody who mourns over Yerushalayim, zoiche v'roya b'simchasa, is going to merit seeing the simcha, the happiness of Yerushalayim. V'she'eina mis'abel al Yerushalayim, somebody who refrains from mourning, eina roya b'simchasa, will not merit the happiness of the Geula. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned in another brisa, similar brisa, Kol ha'oichel basar v'shoyse yayin b'Tisha B'Av, anybody who eats meat or drinks wine in the Suda Mafsekes just before the onset of Tisha B'Av, Olav HaKosov Omer, the pasuk says about him, V'tahi avoinoisom al atzmoisom, that their sins are going to be on them, and that's not a very good title. Continues the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda mechayev b'kfiyas hamita. The Mishnah said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, a person has to turn his bed over, his bed and not sleep on it, sleep on the floor. The Chachomim did not agree with him. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Amru lo Rabbi Yehuda. The Chachomim said to Rabbi Yehuda, Ledvarecha, according to you that on Tisha B'Av everybody has to turn over their beds and not sleep on their beds. Ubrois, what's with pregnant women or menikois and nursing women? Mate alein, they're not able to sleep on the floor. Omar lohen. So Rabbi Yehuda responded to the Chachomim, Afani lo yomarti. When I said in the Mishnah and that one is chayev b'kfiyas hamita, I only said it elo b'yochil, only somebody who's able to do that. But these women, these pregnant or nursing women who are not able to do it, I, Rabbi Yehuda, agree that they can sleep on their beds. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned in another brisa, Moida Rabbi Yehuda l'Chachomim, that Rabbi Yehuda agreed to the Chachomim b'she'ena yochil, that somebody who's not able to sleep on the floor, that he doesn't have to sleep on the floor, he can sleep on his bed. And this brisa adds on, Moidim Chachomim and Rabbi Yehuda. The Chachomim, who, according to our Mishnah, Lo Hoidu Lo Chachomim, they didn't agree with him. The Chachomim agreed to Rabbi Yehuda b'yochil. If he's able to sleep on the floor, the Chachomim agreed to Rabbi Yehuda, turn your bed over and sleep on the floor. And it's only if somebody who's not able to sleep on the floor that the Chachomim say, don't turn your bed over. And now the question is, if both Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachomim agree that anybody who's able to sleep on the floor should turn their bed over and sleep on the floor, and anyone who's not able to sleep on the floor can sleep on their bed, then what's the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachomim? What did Rabbi Yehuda say that the Chachomim don't agree to? My beinayu, asks the Gemara. Answers the Gemara, Ika benayu she'ar mitois. The other beds in the house, that according to Rabbi Yehuda says that if you're able to sleep on the floor, turn over your bed and turn over all the other beds in the house. The Chachamim say no. The Chachamim say that if you're able to sleep on the floor, then turn over your bed. You do not need to turn over all the beds in the house. Kedetanya, as we saw in a Brisa, and this Brisa is regarding the regular mourning, that lichpois hamita, that one, they said, the Chachamim said, that Kasha'amru, lichpois hamita, when they said that one should turn over a bed and not sleep on a bed, loy mitase bilvadu koifa, not only his bed, elo kol hamitois kuranu koifa, all the beds in the house he should also turn over. And Rabbi Yehuda here in the halachas of Tisha B'Av is saying the same as what that Brisa said in regarding other mourning, other aveilus. And that is the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda said turn over all the beds, the Chachamim didn't agree that you have to turn over all the other beds. Omar Rava said, Hilchasa Ketana Didon, the halacha is like the Tana of our Mishnah who argued with Rabbi Yehuda and said, but not only that, he holds of the Chachamim, but not like we just saw in the Brisa, that the Chachamim say that if you're able to sleep on the floor, you should turn over your bed and sleep on the floor. No, Kol Ikar. Even if he's able to sleep on the floor, he should not sleep on the floor, and he does not need to turn over his beds, because the halacha is like the Chachamim that argued with Rabbi Yehuda completely. This ruling of Rava was regarding, or only regarding Tisha B'Av. Regarding other Avelim, then Rava doesn't say this halacha. And one does have to turn over one's bed and not sleep on the bed. And Tosfos discusses why nowadays, even with Avelim, regular people in mourning, why they do not practice this custom, and Tosfos discusses that. And in Mirz Hashem, in the next shir, we're going to continue from here.